September 1st, 2019, Grand Bahama Island. A Category 5 hurricane has just made landfall, and what happens next shouldn't be possible.
Cars and entire homes submerged.
Everyone, please pray for us, please. Please, my baby's only 4 months old. Please pray for us. People trying to make it to the other side where this white house is, but some people, the water just took them.
Sustained winds of 185 miles per hour, tying the all-time record for the strongest Atlantic landfall in recorded history. And then it stops moving. Not slows down, not weakens. Stops.
I don't know how well you can see it, but I want you to listen to the wind and the howl of the wind as it goes by. We've seen large pieces of debris flying in the other direction. All right, and it looks like we've just lost power.
For the next 41 hours, the most powerful storm ever to strike the Bahamas sits almost completely stationary over a single island of 50,000 people.
We're facing a hurricane. As a physician, I've been trained to withstand many things, but never anything like this.
At times, the National Hurricane Center officially classifies its forward motion as 0 miles per hour. Stationary. Unmoving. A Category 5 hurricane parked over a residential community, like a loaded weapon left pointed at the same place for nearly 2 days.
In the Bahamas, a Category 5 hurricane churning for hours, just really sitting there. Homes wiped away, no power tonight, devastation everywhere you look. And ABC's Marcus.
Here is what most people don't know about Hurricane Dorian. The wind speed wasn't what made it the deadliest storm in modern Bahamian history. What made it deadly was that it refused to leave, and by the time people realized that, it was already too late. This is the story of the storm that didn't move and the island it erased. To understand what happens on September 1st, 2019, you have to look at the Bahamas the way the people who live there do. The Bahamas are an archipelago of more than 700 islands, stretching across approximately 100,000 to 180,000 square miles of the western Atlantic, just 50 miles off the coast of Florida. They are, for most of the world, a postcard. Turquoise water, white sand, the kind of place people save up for years to visit. Behind that postcard is a country of just over 400,000 people, with an economy almost entirely dependent on tourism and fishing, scattered across islands so spread out that some communities can only be reached by boat or plane. The two islands at the very north of the chain are Grand Bahama and Great Abacos. Together, they are home to roughly 76,000 people. Grand Bahama hosts Freeport, the country's second largest city. Great Abacos is dotted with small fishing communities, Marsh Harbor, Hope Town, Treasure Key, and the shanty towns of Haitian migrants who have lived in the Bahamas for generations, working in construction and fishing, many of them undocumented. These islands had survived hurricanes before, many hurricanes. The Bahamas sit in the middle of the Atlantic Hurricane Corridor, a path that the most powerful storms in the basin have traveled for as long as records have been kept. The locals know how to prepare. They've done this before, many times. They know how to read a forecast. They know what to do when a Category 4 is bearing down on them. But Grand Bahama had never been struck by a Category 5 in recorded history. And nobody, not the meteorologists, not the residents, not the government, understood what it would mean. Because hurricanes aren't supposed to behave like this. That is what was about to happen. Dorian begins its life on August 24th, 2019, as a tropical wave moving off the west coast of Africa. For most of its early existence, it is unremarkable. It strengthens slowly into a tropical storm, drifts across the Atlantic, and on August 28th, passes between Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands as a Category 1 hurricane. Damage is modest. Most forecasters at this point believe Dorian will track north and threaten the southeastern United States. That changes on August 30th. As Dorian moves over the open Atlantic between Puerto Rico and the Bahamas, it enters one of the most favorable environments any storm could find. The water below it is exceptionally warm, over 30 degrees Celsius, with no significant cooler layer below the surface. The wind shear above it is unusually low. There is nothing in the atmosphere to stop it from intensifying. No resistance, no interruption, just fuel. Dorian explodes. Meteorologists watching in real time begin to realize something is wrong. In just 36 hours, the storm goes from a Category 2 hurricane to a Category 5 with sustained winds of 185 miles per hour. Its central pressure drops to 910 millibars, making it one of the most intense Atlantic hurricanes ever observed. Forecasters at the National Hurricane Center begin issuing warnings that are among the most urgent ever written for the region. The Bahamian government issues mandatory evacuations for the Abacos and Grand Bahama. Prime Minister Hubert Minnis goes on national television and tells residents not to be foolish and try to brave out the storm, warning that those who do not evacuate are placing themselves in extreme danger.
Those who refuse to evacuate place themselves in great danger from this very, very powerful and life-threatening hurricane.
This wasn't a routine warning. This was a final one. Tens of thousands of people leave, but for the residents of the most low-lying communities, including the Haitian shanty towns of Marsh Harbor, where housing is informal and migration status complicates evacuation, leaving is not always possible. They prepare as best they can. They board up windows, they move to the interior of buildings, they wait, because for many of them, there is nowhere else to go. What is approaching them is not just the strongest hurricane ever to strike the Bahamas. It is also a storm that is about to do something nearly unprecedented in modern Atlantic hurricane records. Above Dorian, in the upper atmosphere, the steering currents that normally push hurricanes along their tracks have collapsed. And without those currents, a hurricane loses something critical: direction. A high-pressure system over Bermuda is acting like a wall. Another system to the south is pulling. The result, in the words of Jeff Masters, the meteorology director at Weather Underground, is unprecedented. We have never had a Category 5 stall for so long in the Atlantic hurricane record, until now. That is what is about to happen to the Bahamas. At 12:40 p.m. on Sunday, September 1st, 2019, the eye of Hurricane Dorian makes landfall on Elbow Key in the Abacos.
You can see what it's doing here, and off in the distance, those waves crashing against the pier. Officials fear that this storm will leave catastrophic damage here in this part of the islands.
Sustained winds, 185 miles per hour. Gusts, over 220. Storm surge, 23 feet. The damage on Great Abaco is immediate and absolute. The wind alone strips homes down to their concrete foundations. The storm surge then arrives and finishes what the wind started. In Marsh Harbor, the largest town on the island, 90% of the infrastructure is damaged or destroyed.
The damage, it was unbelievable. It literally looks like a war zone here.
The shanty towns, including the area known as the Mud, where most of the Haitian migrant community lived in informal housing, are not damaged. They are erased. Bulldozed flat by the combination of wind and water, leaving only foundations and debris. Up to this point, everything is still within expectations. What happens next is not. The storm crosses to Grand Bahama, and it stops. This is the moment everything changes. Late on September 1st, satellite imagery and Hurricane Hunter aircraft confirm what radar has been suggesting for hours. Dorian's forward motion has slowed to 1 mile per hour, then to half a mile per hour, then to nothing. The National Hurricane Center officially classifies the storm as stationary. The eye of a Category 5 hurricane sits over the eastern end of Grand Bahama and refuses to move. For the next 41 hours, that is where it stays. Not minutes, not a few hours, nearly 2 full days of the same storm. What this means on the ground is something that has no parallel in modern hurricane history. Houses that survived the first hour of the storm are still being battered when the second day begins. The storm surge that floods Grand Bahama in the afternoon does not recede. It is held in place by the same wind field that drove it ashore, while more rain piles on top of it. NASA satellites later estimate that some parts of Grand Bahama receive 35 inches of rain in a single 48-hour period. 5 feet of water from one storm. The wind does not relent. It blows at sustained Category 4 and 5 levels for almost 2 full days. Buildings are taken apart, piece by piece, layer by layer, by a force that simply does not stop.
Survivors would later describe it
as a hurricane that would not end. In Marsh Harbor, 15-year-old Benson Etienne is sheltering in a 2-story building with his family of 8 when the hurricane begins. The roof is the first thing to go. With nothing above their heads, the family stands exposed to 185-mile-per-hour winds and torrential rain. Then the windows break. Then the walls begin to give way. Before the building collapses, the family makes it out. What they walk into is not a neighborhood anymore. It is a flooded landscape of debris and storm surge water, with strong currents pulling in every direction. They have to swim for their lives. Through what Benson would later describe as dirty water, contaminated with sewage, fuel, the contents of every destroyed home around them. All 8 members of the family survive. Many of his neighbors do not, which means they lived long enough to see what happened to everyone else.
Across town, 37-year-old Winston Youth is sheltering at a friend's house with 5 others. As the hurricane intensifies, the building begins to fail. He is thrown into the storm. He clings to a tree for hours, holding on while everything around him disappears. The wind tearing at him, debris striking him, the water rising. At some point during the storm, he loses a finger. He does not realize it has happened until later. The skin on his hand had gone numb from the cold seawater. When he finally looks down, the finger is gone. Of the 6 people who sheltered together that morning, only 2 survive. 4 people vanish in a matter of hours. In a small fishing community on Grand Bahama, a mother named June Russell would later describe what she watched her neighbors go through. People being separated from their families in the floodwater. People watching loved ones slip out of their arms into the dark, churning water and disappear. Levels of trauma she had not known were possible. In the shanty towns of the Mud, the community of Haitian migrants in Marsh Harbor, the situation is worse than anywhere else on either island. The housing is informal, mostly wood-framed structures, often without permits. There are people in the Mud who, when the storm is over, simply cannot be found. Their families search. The Bahamian government searches. International aid teams search. Most are never recovered. No closure, no graves, just absence. These are the missing 600. They are the reason the Bahamian Minister of Health, in the days after the storm, would warn that the final death toll was expected to be staggering. They are the reason that,
Even years later, official statements about Dorian say the true death toll may be more than 600, a number that exists in government records but cannot be confirmed because the bodies were carried out to sea. The official total, 6 years later, still stands at 74. Everyone in the Bahamas knows it is wrong. By the early morning of September 3rd, the steering currents in the upper atmosphere finally shift. Dorian begins to move. Slowly at first, 2 miles per hour, then 5, then 10. By the evening of September 3rd, the all clear is given for the islands. The storm pulls away to the north and weakens, eventually making a fourth landfall as a Category 1 in North Carolina before dissipating in the North Atlantic. What it leaves behind is unlike any hurricane aftermath in modern Caribbean history.
There was nothing left. It was gone. The house was gone.
On Great Abaco, an estimated 75% of all homes are damaged or destroyed. The power grid is gone. The airport is underwater. The smell of death lingers in the air for weeks because rescue teams cannot reach all of the bodies. On Grand Bahama, satellite analysis later shows that in some neighborhoods, between 76 and 100% of buildings have been destroyed. The aquifer that provides drinking water for hundreds of wells across the island is contaminated with salt water from the storm surge. Years later, parts of it are still being restored. Total damage across the Bahamas reaches $3.4 billion. That is 1/4 of the entire country's annual economy. Gone in 41 hours. The reason this storm became something none of the residents had ever seen before has been studied closely in the years since. NASA, NOAA, and the National Hurricane Center have all released analysis explaining what happened in the upper atmosphere above Dorian during those critical days. Recent research has shown that hurricane stalling has become more common over the past several decades. The average forward speed of North Atlantic hurricanes has decreased by 17% between 1944 and 2017, according to a study by federal scientists. The reasons are complex and still being investigated, but the trend is clear. What was unprecedented in 2019 may not stay unprecedented for long. And this is the part that concerns scientists the most. In Marsh Harbor, the rebuilding has been slow. Years after the storm, structures are still missing. Communities are still scattered. Many of the survivors relocated permanently to Nassau or to other islands and never came back. The shantytowns of the mud were not rebuilt. The Haitian migrant community that had lived there for generations was effectively dissolved by the storm. For the rest of the world, Hurricane Dorian was a major hurricane, a bad one, memorable. For the Bahamas, it was something different. It was the storm that taught them that a hurricane does not need to be moving to destroy a country. It just needs to be strong enough and patient enough to stay. The wind didn't end Marsh Harbor. The water didn't end the mud. What ended them was that the storm decided not to leave. And next time, it might not be the only one. I make these videos to tell stories that matter. And the truth is, they only reach people if you choose to support them. So if you think more people should see this, a like, a comment, or even just sharing it really helps more than you think. Every small action pushes these stories further, and that's how they stay alive. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.